All right, so I called the meeting to order and I'll do roll call. Council at large Cummins.
Here.
At large Postian.
Here.
Council Ward number 1 Hembry.
Here.
Ward number 2 Helm.
Here.
And Ward number 3 McNeil.
Here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so now to the agenda. There are no other additions. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Cummins with the first.
Second.
And Helm with the second.
Postian,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins.
All right, so now we'll move down to communications. We actually do have someone scheduled tonight. So Scott Derby. All right. Discuss or report on 1101 Cedar Street, or
Yeah.
take it away.
Would you like to come up to the?
Or if you want to.
There you are. Okay. I just didn't see.
You
There
can, you can be picked up better here.
Oh, yeah.
You want to?
If you come up to the podium, yeah, the microphone will be able to pick you up better too. Sorry about that.
I don't think you can see it.
Mr. Derby?
My name is Scott Derby. I have 4 children, 2 grandchildren. My wife and family live about a mile north of Bennett, Iowa. I own Derby Homes, and I've been a carpenter for about 30 years. My business invests and restores old buildings and homes that are in poor to devastating condition. The last 4 properties I've restored were either scheduled for demolition or there was heavy talk of them being demolished. I'm here today to see if there's any interest in saving 1011 Cedar Street here in Tipton. It's an 1888 home with lots of historical craftsmanship. The home has all of its original oak floors, has all of its original trim, doors, light fixtures, corbels outside. The home also has all of its original hardwood siding, which I believe to be redwood siding. Old growth redwood is significant because it's considered to be the best wood siding that's ever been used. Old growth redwood is no longer harvested anywhere in the world today. So the siding alone makes the historic home worth saving.
All right. Does anybody have any questions on anything that he said?
You plan to follow up with a more formal presentation? Probably.
Yeah, so if we were to move forward with a proper proposal, the proposal would probably include conveying the house to the Derbys so that we can save the house. Be approximately a 24-month timeline to fix the home. I personally put in about 700 to 1,000 hours of labor into a house like that to save it, or roughly 6 to 12 months of continuous labor. It's worth saying the house currently has a 0 value. These homes often still have a 0 value even after the first $20,000 is invested. And what I mean by that is just because I put a nice steel roof on the building, it still won't have a value because the inside of the home is devastated.
So just to make sure, though, you stated before that you've done this.
Yes. Oh, so the proposal would include pictures of properties that I've done from start to finish. And I could say at least 2 of the properties were in worse condition than this house, if you can believe that. But when you see the pictures and you see kind of the process of what happens, they turn out amazing. So.
What we were looking at with this property before the Derbys came on the scene was we had an owner who unfortunately didn't have the financial capacity to take care of the house. And we were, if it's a solution, you take a house that is in trouble, with whatever problems under the property maintenance code. and you go to the magistrate, and usually you're dealing with somebody who's unwilling. I couldn't describe the previous owner as unwilling. It's more of a case of lacking the financial capacity. And so the city was looking at taking on the property, just having it transferred to the city. The city was looking at doing whatever the cost of demolition would be, and that would be significant. And then maybe putting it up to see if anybody might be interested in coming along and putting a house there. If this could happen, it would be a much better reality because we wouldn't be demolishing. There would be a restoration project that would provide a home for someone. And the other part of it is, if it all works, the question then is, can you duplicate it? Can you do it somewhere else? And hopefully the answer is yes. So anyway, it's worthwhile to hear what the Derbies present in a more formal way. And what they present and what they feel they need as far as timeline for the project, we would put into a purchase agreement. We'd have eventually, I think it'd play out that there would be a public hearing on the contents of the purchase agreement. People who feel they have a better proposal can come in. People who like this proposal can say how they feel. Or it could be the case that it'll be more like a formality and nobody will come in at all. But anyway, that's down the line. I'm glad that you came in and gave the council a preview of the fact that you're coming back later, because it gives them something to think about and look forward
Yeah,
to.
as long as there's interest in the project, then I'll come up with a formal proposal. It takes a lot of time and there'll be a lot of pictures, a lot of hunting through finances on what we spent on properties. We'd want to kind of show the whole scope of what it takes to save one of these houses. It's very extensive, but I do all sides of the work myself, so that's where it's feasible. When other people get a hold of a property like this, it doesn't typically make sense. The cost will exceed the value of the home. You know?
Mhm.
And same with tearing down a property. A house like that in town could be $25,000 to tear down, you know, and to fill in and properly remove all the utilities and asbestos and lead paint removal and things like that. So it can be just costly just doing that.
Definitely. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Yes. All right, seeing as that was the one that we had scheduled, we'll move on to the unscheduled communications. So that opens it up for anyone here or online as well to address the city council. It's 3 minutes if you want to or need to comment to the city council. No one here in person, anyone online? All right, seeing if there's none, I'll close that portion of the meeting and we'll move on to the consent agenda. These can be enacted with one motion. They are the approval of the council meeting minutes from December 5th, approval of the library minutes from November 14th, approval of the library director's report from November of 2022, approval of the airport minutes from December 14th, approval of a liquor license renewal at the Rickery, approval of a liquor license renewal at Tiger Mart, approval of a liquor license renewal for Double Bogey Bar and Grill, and also the approval of a liquor license renewal at Cedar Lanes. And then there's an approval for a change order on the North Avenue reconstruction project in the amount of $1,294.25. And also the approval of a claims register, which includes claims paid under the current purchase policy. Do any of these need to be pulled out? Seeing there is none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Helm with the first and Cummins with the second.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins, Postian.
Yes.
All right, so the first thing tonight, we do have a public hearing. It's a public hearing on the proposed sale of city-owned real estate. That would be 524 Cedar Street, and that would be effective January 1st of 2023. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Motion.
Cummins with the first
Second.
and McNeil with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins, Pashton,
Yes.
Helm.
Yes.
All right, so the public hearing is open. Mr. Wagner, any comments?
Unless, I was out part of the day, so unless something's come in that Amy's aware of, I'm not aware of any input that's come in previous to opening the public hearing as comments on this proposal. This again is the Rhinos building. And this has a matching resolution in the body of the city business portion of the agenda, but unless anybody wants me to summarize it further, you know about this project, and we've been working on this. I think we passed some of the very first resolutions on this back in January, and it's been working through grant applications and tax credit applications and the proposed ownership group working through their own plan for the building and including both floors. So that's all I really have, unless anybody has a question for me.
And any comments? Seeing that there are none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Is there a motion to close? Helm with the first and Cummins with the second.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins, Pashton,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
All right, first up tonight under city business is Hannah Schultz, the school's district homeless liaison. She does have a presentation. She kind of booted it up here. I don't want to mess it up, so I'll have her bring it back up.
I'm gonna have to be clicking over here too, so.
I'll get out of the way.
I'm gonna stay in everybody's way. Do you
I
want
kind of
to?
forgot that other community members would be here too, so.
Do you want to?
Fun.
Do you want to share this with Amy afterwards?
Sure.
Share the slideshow?
Yeah.
So we can put it in the minutes.
Okay. This is also my first time doing this presentation to a group of people, so you're all my guinea pigs. Thanks. My name is Hannah Schultz. I am a student advocate in the community school district. I was middle school and elementary up until this year. And this year I am just elementary. We now have 2 other student family advocates. But I am also the CPI instructor, so I teach restraints and like laws about seclusion and how we physically restrain students if we need to. And I'm the homeless liaison for the district. So I go through training every year about homelessness and what are the rights of homeless children so that they can have access to education just the same as anyone else would. And part of my duties and responsibilities as a homeless liaison is to train staff, talk to community members, collaborate with local agencies so that we can kind of all work together to support the needs of homeless families. I think the way that we are identifying students is changing. And so there's been an increase in the number of students that we're designating as homeless in our district. And this is now my 2nd year doing this, as I've kind of grown into it a little bit more and learned about some of the policies and procedures and how we create things. There's some things that clash a little bit. So I want to introduce those to people so that we can start working together to remedy some of those things. So, excuse me. Just to start off, McKinney-Vento is the actual federal law that kind of dictates homelessness and the rights of homeless students in education. So this is kind of just a brief summary. It ensures the educational rights and protections for homeless children and youth so that they have equal access to the same free, appropriate education as other children and youth. This one kind of lists some of the educational rights. Some ones that people don't think about is like if a student doesn't have appropriate documents to enroll in school, this kind of bypasses that. They have the right to enroll even without those documents. They have the right to remain in the school of origin. We'll talk about what that is in a minute. if that's actually what's in the student's best interest. They have the right to receive transportation to and from the school of origin and the right to receive support for academic success. This law also is what allocates funding, which will call funding as well, allocates funding so that these processes can be carried out appropriately. I'm not going to read this word for word, but this kind of just shows the evolution of the legislation. Back in 1987 was when the first policies and laws were put in place to make sure that students were enrolling in school despite being homeless. Then it's been amended a few times. The No Child Left Behind had some strengthening power to make sure that districts were following some of these regulations. And then the last one was in 2015 with the Every Student Succeeds Act. It just expanded the rights to attend the school of origin and also started including preschools. So I think when I talk to people about homelessness, they kind of assume that homeless means sleeping outside, sleeping on a park bench, sleeping in your car. But there are actually a very specific definition of homelessness that encompasses many more people. So the actual definition, according to McKinney-Vento, is any child or youth who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So this could be living in a homeless shelter, living in a motel. Let's say you were evicted from a home and you go to live at a friend's house. That qualifies. That's called doubled up. Economic hardship, losing your house to a fire, flood, things like that. Any children who are abandoned in hospitals, living in a public or private place that's not designated for regular sleeping, and then migratory children living under these circumstances as well. In that definition, it talks about fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, and that's kind of where things get a little gray. Fixed would mean permanent. It's not subject to change. This would mean that things like living in a shelter, tent, car, campers do not meet the definition of a fixed residence. Regular would mean that it has a sufficient expectation of permanence, so there's no threat that you're going to be evicted, or you're not worried that you're going to be kicked out of a friend's house, things like that. If you are living under the threat of eviction, temporarily living with other family members or friends, anyone moving from house to house to house, they would also qualify as homeless. This last one, adequate, this has been really big in our community this year, because if you don't have adequate housing, even if you physically have a house, if it is inadequate or substandard, you qualify for McKinney-Vento. So adequate would refer to the resident's ability to be inhabited with safety and comfort. Another definition that's used was meeting the physical and psychological safety needs of a person. This must meet the minimum structural heating, lighting, ventilation, sanitary, occupancy, and maintenance standards compatible with application, buildings, and housing codes. So if a student or family is living in a place that doesn't have heat, like the roof leaks into the house, or they're not protected from the elements in some way, that would be considered substandard or inadequate housing, and they would potentially qualify for McKinney-Vento benefits. There's another category of homeless youth. This would be an unaccompanied homeless youth. So if let's say a kid is kicked out of their household, parents say you can't live here anymore, despite them still being in school, they would be designated an unaccompanied homeless youth or unaccompanied minor. And some of their rights change a little bit. They don't have to have parent signature for certain things. And then they qualify for the same benefits as far as getting transportation to school and things like that as well. And then it becomes my job to kind of be that kid's advocate and make sure that they're accessing their education in the same way anybody else would, if they have the house. I put this up here because I want to just define a couple of things because it'll come up a little bit later. Anytime a family or a student is designated as being homeless, if they remain, like when they're designated as homeless, we are their school of origin. So they were living in this community, this is their home district, they were attending here. And because we don't have any shelters here, oftentimes a student might have to go live in the shelter in Iowa City or the shelter in Muscatine. Just because they live across those county lines and live in those districts, that does not mean that they attend school in those districts, because we are their school of origin. And they have a right to continue attending their school of origin despite this change in location. So that's kind of where that definition comes from. It talks here a little bit about how long it stays that way. A student is designated homeless And they remain with that status for the duration of the school year, remainder of the school year. So even if they establish housing 3 months after being designated homeless, they stay that way. They keep that status for the rest of the year. And we are required to continue supporting them through the rest of that academic school year, or for the duration that they are experiencing homelessness. Same thing if they are designated over the summer, it would be the next school year. The resident district would be the local area where the student lives. So if the student goes and stays at the shelter in Iowa City, their resident district would be one of the Iowa City schools, but they are not required to attend that school. We'll talk about these student-centered factors. What is best for the student? It is often best for the student to stay in their home district. And then that means that we, as this district, are required to provide transportation and follow up with all these other things. We also consider the impact of mobility on achievement, education, health, and safety when determining what is best here. But school of origin is always a default. This means for transportation, all of these homeless children and youth are eligible for transportation to the school of origin. So last year when we had a student living in a shelter, we had to arrange and either hire a driver to go get that person, to bring them to school, to take them home at the end of the day, or we had to somehow figure out how they were going to get to school. If that was paying for an Uber every morning, or a friend, parent, some other guardian, someone else in their life was willing to transport them, we had to reimburse them. There's some pretty significant costs that come with some of these things that are happening. It might also mean we have kind of a specific calculator for how we calculate gas, but we do have to, we can't shorten their school day. We can't say, oh, you'll attend classes online. It has to be what they were experiencing and what's best for them. This right for transportation, like I said, extends for the duration of the homelessness or until the end of the school year in which they obtain housing. We can sometimes, when these things cross district lines, we can work with other school districts to apportion the costs of transportation between the district. So if I have a family living in Muscatine at a friend's house, then I can call the Muscatine Homeless Liaison and we can talk about how are we going to apportion this cost. Are we going to split it 50-50? Are we going to, they drive them to the county line and we send someone to go pick them up, and then that's splitting it 50-50. And if we don't agree on something, if we don't agree it could be 70-30, then we split it 50-50. That's what the law requires. There are some funds set aside to support these things, McKinney-Vento funds. I'll show you a slide here in a second. There is a sub-grant application process. We as a school district do not qualify to even apply for sub-grants. So we don't have any grant funding because we're not eligible. Only 10 out of our 327 school districts in the state currently receive sub-grants. So there isn't a lot of money, but it is a federal law that we are required to follow, and there isn't money that comes along with it. So we just have to support this as a school district. There is also some Title I funding that is set aside, but as with a lot of Title I funding, that kind of can be worked through pretty quickly. So. This is showing a little bit of Iowa specific data. I have national data if you're interested in knowing that too, but I wanted to talk about Iowa. This is actually the last grouping of data, but I wanted to leave it up here because it shows an important trend. You can see here that from 2015 to 2018, it slightly increased, but for the most part remained pretty stable. And then it looks like it's decreasing here, but we had COVID during these years where kids were not in school for some of the time. A lot of students did online learning, and it changed how we can identify students. So though it looks like this trend is going down, we also have to consider what are the other factors that are contributing to that. We are potentially identifying slightly fewer, but in those years, it was because fewer kids were physically attending school. This was that number I was talking about. It'll come up again. We have, well, this is from the 2021 annual social and economic supplement survey. We had 327 school districts in our state, and of those, only 10 of them received sub-grants or any type of additional McKinney-Vento funding. This talks about the numbers of students from year to year and what it looked like for being some of these things are kind of like dual diagnosis in mental health, right? Like if you have one thing, you often have another thing. Kids who are identified as homeless are at a higher risk of requiring special education services, being diagnosed with a disability, things like that. So this shows a little bit of that. It talks about it down here too. They're not mutually exclusive, so you can be more than one, right? Limited English proficient students could also be migratory children or youth. For Tipton specifically, we have approximately 940 students in our district right now, including our preschool, and our free and reduced population is 34.6%. Based on national statistics, we should have our homeless numbers should be roughly 6.5% of our free and reduced population. So if our free and reduced population is roughly 325 students, which is about the size of our elementary school, 6.5% of that would be about 21 students experiencing homelessness here in Tipton. If we went by another kind of gauge that they use, they call it kind of the target number. Not that we want that many, but just kind of following a national trend, we know that we're on track when we're identifying approximately that amount. If we go by that 2.5%, it's approximately 25 students are experiencing homelessness. Some of the effects of homelessness on students, students who experience homelessness, that we just see them struggling more often. It's often because they move around a lot. They're hungry, tired, stressed because they don't know where they're going to sleep that night, or their living conditions are not adequate. They don't have school supplies. They don't have a place to do their homework or study when they go home. They don't have access to reliable transportation. They might not even have a parent or a guardian helping them out. So for example, if I have a homeless student in high school right now who is an unaccompanied minor, doesn't have a parent helping them out with things, they still have to take the ACT. They still have to apply for a FAFSA. They still have to apply for colleges. And these are things that a parent usually helps out with, right? And they don't have that. And then there's a lot of things, I think it's on my next slide, that when you are that student, you are eligible for a lot of your fees to be waived to take the ACT. You become an unaccompanied minor for your FAFSA, so your parents' income doesn't count as income for you to apply for school, so you're eligible for more scholarship money or Pell Grants, things like that. But you have to know these things, and I would say most kids don't. Students experiencing homelessness are also more likely to be chronically absent from school, get lower grades, have special education needs, score poorly on assessment tests, and drop out of school. Some of these barriers, this is kind of more big picture barrier stuff. How we identify eligible students. This is my second year of being a homeless liaison, and I'm just now getting to a point where I can start bringing this information out to other people because it is a lot of work and there's a lot of kind of information to break down. And it's hard to identify everybody who would be eligible if you don't know what the standards are to be designated as homeless. So training, just knowing what you're looking for and what actually qualifies for McKinney-Vento. I think that can be a community thing too. It doesn't only have to be a me thing or the school thing. If the police department has something going on with a family, then we might collaborate together and say, hey, this is a family who might really benefit from these things. So I want to kind of start creating these systems where it's not just one. We're not all in these little silos. Transportation is a big barrier. Regardless to funding, schools are required to provide students transportation to school and other school-sponsored extracurricular activities. So if a homeless student is participating or basketball or theater, choir, anything like that, we also have to provide them transportation to that. Anything that a student who isn't experiencing homelessness would have access to, these students also do too. Funding is a big barrier. Like I said, only 10 school districts out of the 327 have any McKinney-Vento funding. And there are things like waived exam fees, temporary housing situations or options, and transportation that require funding. And then something that has come to my attention this year is just the access to affordable and adequate housing and social services. I've worked in the mental health field for a decade now, and Cedar County in general just doesn't have a lot of access to mental health services. We don't have a psychiatrist here. We don't have therapists here. We just now got a mental and behavioral health services agency that's out off of Spruce, Tatum's Touch, and that's new. We don't have a lot here. And so everyone has to go out. And when you're already experiencing homelessness, already don't have transportation, it is very difficult to access those services. But this access to affordable and adequate housing is something that has come up for us a lot this year. So not that these things have to be answered right now, but I wanted this presentation to start a conversation, which kind of fit in actually. What happens with substandard housing here in Tipton? Specifically substandard housing that is currently occupied with residents. And not that they are financially unable to make changes like we were talking about with another family, but they physically can't because they're renters and their landlord won't fix anything. And they don't have any power to stay one way or the other. Part of that conversation, I think, is going to be some Iowa rental codes and versus the Tipton rental code. If I understand correctly, Tipton doesn't have a rental code. And I'm curious how that plays into how much substandard housing we might have and how that affects these families who are living in these substandard housing conditions. And in what ways can the community and the school collaborate to create policies that are trauma informed and combat some of these issues at more of a systemic level? It was kind of my goal in starting this conversation. And I know that that means I hope we have future conversations. But I only had 10 minutes, so it was like McKinney-Vento 101 really fast.
As well.
Thanks. Does anyone have any questions? Are they allowed to ask me questions?
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't know.
definitely. Yeah.
Anyone have any questions or comments or?
Yeah, I'm curious, you touched on the extracurricular. I was gonna ask that and then you mentioned it.
Yeah.
But what about the needs for like the instrument for band or the cleats for football or whatever? How does that fall in?
It would usually be me reaching out to see if anyone would be willing to purchase those items for a student. I would say that I have really great working relationships with our faith-based agencies here in town. I work very closely with Dion at the Iowa State Extension Office. She also helps fund a lot of our social, emotional, behavioral health events that we host. She also helps with a lot of my resources and stuff. She connects me with other people. I am connected with a transitional planning specialist I don't know what to call specialist. She works with DHS and she works with the homeless youth population. And so, for example, she's helped me get what she considers like an apartment in a suitcase. So if I have an unaccompanied minor, then I can get them a broom, vacuum if they need it, dishes, silverware. There's an agency out of Davenport and Moline called Bethany for Children and Families, and I'm connected with them. They send me a list of any available furniture that they have that's free. We just have to get it. So then I'm usually driving to Davenport or Moline in my truck and loading up furniture, and then I can take it to that student or that family that needs those items. I do have some amazing community members, also teachers donate things a lot. So I help, like I have gift cards that are donated to me and I track, and they're all locked in my office. And if I have a student who needs school supplies, then I will go buy them school supplies. If I have a student who needs hats, gloves, coats, things like that, I have money that's donated to me that I usually go out and buy those things. Or I just buy them.
How do people reach out to you if they need help?
I'm listed on the website as the homeless liaison.
On the school website.
School website, yep. I'm also, I talk to a lot of people. Like if you go and talk to Dion, she'll be like, oh, you need to talk to Hannah. So they can connect that way. You can call me at the elementary school. You can email me. All of that contact information is on the school website. There's also other amazing resources that we've put on our website. Me and the student family advocate at the high school last year spent a lot of time developing a resource website. If you haven't seen it, I would encourage you to check it out. It's awesome. It has as much information as I could possibly fit on the website that talked about psychiatry services, therapy services, BHIS, inpatient hospitalization if anyone needs that, crisis response, how to access food, how to access clothes, how to access different things. There's a virtual calming room for students. There's all sorts of stuff that really touches on this. And then once I get past these holidays, because right now we're working on sponsoring families and getting gifts and making sure families' needs are met before we all leave for break. After that, I am going to be developing kind of like a homeless liaison section on the website so that parents and students are educated about their rights as children who might be experiencing homelessness, and also just so that we can kind of increase that communication.
In Tipton,
Mhm.
if you were to, I don't know if it's possible to put it to a general number, How many people are we talking about that fit some definition of homeless within Tipton?
Yep. So if we were on track with this national statistic or kind of guideline, we would be at about 21 students. We're over halfway there. I know that there's more that just haven't been identified yet. But when I go through the training and everything, it talks about how it is not a student or a family's responsibility to come to you and say, hey, I'm homeless now. It is our responsibility as a school district and my responsibility as a homeless liaison to be identifying those families. When I know a kid is sleeping on the couch every night, then I need to contact that family and have a conversation about what is the current living situation? What are your needs right now? But we are over halfway to that number.
Now, just so anybody watching, for example, probably the typical perception of homeless means living on the street or
Right.
living without any shelter.
Yep.
Is that among any of those cases? Is that happening here?
It has in my time here. Yes.
It has?
And I've been here for 3 years. This is my 3rd school year.
And these are under the age of 18, non-adult.
Yeah.
What's the most likely, I imagine some of these have been solved along the way.
Yeah.
What's the typical solution that you found?
Changing houses. So for example, any families who are experiencing substandard housing that can't be remedied unless their landlord fixes something, then their option is to move. But we don't have a lot of other housing options, especially for a family, right? Like someone sent me the apartments over in Sycamore the other day, but they have like 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. If you have a family of 5 kids, it's not realistic to move into a 1 bedroom apartment or a 2 bedroom apartment. So a lot of times it means just moving. It also means being doubled up. I would say doubled up is the majority of people who are designated homeless. I think nationally that accounts for like 70 to 75% of people who are designated that way.
And doubled up, you mean more than one family living in the same place?
Yeah, yep. You can be doubled up and not be designated homeless. Like if me and a friend decide, you know what, it's gonna be cheaper if we split rent, so let's move in together, that doesn't count. But if I get kicked out of my house and I need to move in with a friend temporarily, that would count. And that counts for the majority of people who are designated this way.
In coming to talk to the council, the mayor, I'm guessing that there must be 1 or 2 top solutions that a city could do that you have in mind.
Well,
What would that be?
There's a lot that I mean, I've never been on a city council. My whole world is mental health and like inpatient treatment and things like that, working in the school. So this is very new to me, the policy procedure portion of it. Something that has come up a lot for me in my conversations with families who are struggling right now is just this lack of housing, this lack of sufficient housing, not just housing, but sufficient housing, where they can be protected from the elements and have a landlord that is fixing their property and maintaining the property to a standard. Because I know that there are properties that don't meet the Iowa rental code. Then you have the handoff of, do I call the city and say, hey, this house is substandard, there's a family living in it, and then the solution is we kick that family out because this house is condemned? That's not good either, because then this family is not only designated homeless, but they are completely unsheltered, especially right now. It would be pretty devastating. So what do we do from a policy perspective? How do we hold people accountable for maintaining the houses that they are renting out to other people? And that's a new world to me. So I'm open. I'm just here for discussion or future discussion. I just kind of want to bring it to the table so that we can have future discussion. Is it for me or yeah?
For you and just in general. So I I teach in Iowa City now, but I live here. I used to teach here. And I knew a lot of this, but the one part now makes sense why so much is invested into some of our homeless families at my school. It's like, okay, it's November, they have a house now. Why are we transferring them back clear across town to our school all the rest of the year?
Yep.
I see why now. But I will say Dion is amazing. She
Mhm.
sends out emails to all of us and we
Yeah.
all find help for these people. And the ministerial association, again, is amazing with
Yes.
helping out families. And we have way more food pantries now than we used to. On the housing part, as you get into that, now, my entire life and also being a landlord with multiple locations. A lot of landlords talk, and I know we have talked about codes before, but I also know there are times where they're given more rights than we are as landlords. And I know, yes, we have, not mine, I'm really not mine, but there are some houses in town that are not adequate. And yes, I know the landlord doesn't want to fix them, but I also know from the other side of it, at times when they do fix something, but then the person is not paying rent month after month, and sometimes like for a whole year. So then the landlord's like, well, I'm not gonna fix anything if you're not gonna pay me rent. And they'll just keep living there and not paying rent.
And
Even though they're working and because I help a lot of these families. I help a lot of these families. I run the gathering. I help a lot of these families. And I'm helping one right now, and she's got 5 kids, and a brand new baby. And now they're not paying utilities and the furnace isn't working and the landlord's not fixing it, but I also know it's because they have to pay rent in almost a year and they're just choosing not to. And then a lot of these families that I've helped over the years too have pets. So then it's like, okay, people, you need another house. You got all of these people. So you really need a 3, 4, 5 bedroom house, but you also have pets, and a lot of landlords have had it with pets. I mean, so it's like
it's a vicious
it's a
cycle.
whole cycle.
Yep.
And landlords talk to each other, and it's a small town, so we know a lot of the people, and we know if they take care of the house. You know, so I help some people, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm helping you and doing what I can for you, but I would never rent.
Right, so how do we hold both sides accountable, right? Like,
Right.
you can't be a tenant who doesn't pay a rent, who
Right.
destroys the property, right? Like, there's that standard.
Yep.
And then also, as a landlord, you also have a responsibility to provide standard housing, right? Like, do regular maintenance on your house. If my furnace were to go out, I am required to fix it, or I will live in a very cold house, right?
Right.
Like, that's just my job as a homeowner. So how do we create policies that are all win-win, right? Like, renters have rights, landlords have rights. Like, if you need to evict someone, of course those things happen. And I'm not saying that that's never going to happen again. But I am also seeing this pattern where we get one family out of one house and they go into another house and then we're back in the same position. So how do we create these things so that renters are held accountable and are responsible for paying their rent, doing what they need to do, and landlords are also held accountable for fixing their properties, maintaining habitable living standards.
Yes.
So,
All right.
cool.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Ms. Schultz. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Hannah. And we'll move on to the second item. It's a resolution that would approve the application for the urban revitalization tax exemption filed by the Cedar County Co-op. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is just going to be passed through to the assessor if it does pass tonight.
Yes, and this is for the current project. And the resolution notes that the project is going to run between 2 calendar years. We want to make sure that they get the full benefit of the tax exemption. So we hadn't been noting that in the past, and there have been a couple that as time has gone by, we've had to talk to the assessor to make sure that they don't get lost hopefully this little bit of adding these notes to this, adding them to the application that we attached to this will clarify that. And then the other one that's on here also is at midstream at January 1. So we put in the same language for the other urban revite resolution for tonight.
Any questions on this? Is there a motion to approve this resolution? Henry with the first and Poston with the second.
Cummins.
Yes.
Poston.
Yes.
Helm.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Hembry.
Yes.
All right, next one, it's a resolution that would approve an application for the urban revite for brand new engines. Same thing?
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Henry with the first
Second.
and McNeil with the second.
Poston.
Yes.
Helm.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Hembry.
Yes.
Cummins.
All right, number 4, it's a resolution that would approve the sale and transfer of the city-owned real estate. That was the subject of the public hearing. It's at 524 Cedar Street. Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, and as the mayor mentioned, the effective date of the transfer of ownership is January 1st. As you know, there has been some work going on there, cleaning out junk from the previous owner, previous to the city. And we have an insurance certificate from the people doing the work there to help cover us. The thing I wanted to note in here was the purchase price. There's a reference in one of the whereases saying that it's one of the things worked into it is the cost of the roof replacement. That's the $33,154. So that's the sale price. It mentions a couple other places about expenses as matches to grants that we've applied for. The incoming owner has taken care of those outside of this resolution. So it makes a reference to a couple of things beyond just the roof, but those have been addressed separately.
All right, any questions regarding this? Any comments? Is there a motion to approve this sale?
Motion.
Helm with the first
Second.
and Cummins with the second.
Helm.
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
Hembry.
Yes.
Cummins.
Yes.
Poston.
Need to abstain.
All right. Moving on to number 5, this would be a resolution that would approve the fiscal year 2024 5-year capital improvement program for the airport improvement program data sheets. Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, we asked the council to do this every December. In November, the airport committee reviews a draft, and then for this meeting, it comes to the council. We're not locked into this. It's just giving the FAA a plan for what we foresee. We're still working on land acquisition. That can be the case for a number of years. And the council's policy has been not to pursue eminent domain. So it's a matter of working with property owners when they become ready. And so that's why we see a lot of times the land acquisition getting pushed out more into the future. The one about 2025 is a suggestion from the FAA that refers to the current runway. They're trying to add to the plan the fact that if land acquisition takes a number of years, the current runway is probably going to be up for the need to have further maintenance. And so that's what this is trying to account for. Now, even though it says 2025 and 2026, that's all adjustable. Since we do this every year, this can be adjusted every year. But again, this is largely just SOP that the FAA likes to have done, so we stay in line for funding hopefully when it comes available to us.
All right. If there are no questions, is there a motion to approve this 5-year capital improvement plan? Cummins with the first. And Poston with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins, Postion,
Yes.
Helm.
So number 6, this is a resolution that was set Monday, January 9th of 2023 as the public hearing date regarding proposed plan specs, the form of contract, and then also the estimated cost of the Highway 38 reconstruction project, both phase 2, which would happen in 23, and 3, which would happen in the year 24. Brian?
Yeah, and Origin, or what was IIW, will have someone here in case there are questions when you have the public hearing on January 9th. After that, the key date is mentioned in italics in the resolution. The bid opening is going to be done through the Iowa DOT, and that's scheduled for February 21st. So hopefully we'll get a good result when that happens.
All right, is there a motion to set this hearing? Cummins with the first and McNeil with the second.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins, Postion,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil.
Yes.
All right, number 7, discussion of possible action concerning the hiring of a consultant to inspect the aquatic center's indoor pool for HVAC and paint issues. Mr. Wagner?
Yeah, we had a meeting earlier today at the Aquatic Center, and Adam and Addie were there. Pat O'Connell, who's with our city attorney firm, was there. And a forensic engineer, Kevin Power of KPE, was there. And this is, the action here tonight is to hire his firm for an initial amount of $3,000. I say initial because I've been through this before, and I know Tipton has been through this before my time here, that when you have problems on a job like the Aquatic Center, and you have the engineer and the general contractor basically pointing fingers at each other, we're not going to get anywhere until we have our own expert sort out who's responsible for what. And just doing the walkthrough that we had today, where we were trying to review the problems that came up and the problems that can also be caused just by waiting because of the humidity problem. We need a consultant like this. We need an expert witness. We can't, this is heading either for arbitration or court if nothing stops those two outcomes. And we need not pursue it to those levels unless we have somebody who can speak with expertise on what he thinks happened. And so I would strongly recommend hiring Kevin Power to do this. We had the same problem in my previous town. He was the expert witness there, and there were times when the arbitrator, would hear the claim made by either the engineer or the GC in that case, and the arbitrator would look at this guy as sort of the referee between who's at fault. We need that. We really do. So I would strongly encourage the council to move forward with hiring him for what was today's initial visit. We didn't do it ahead of time. We're doing it basically hoping that the council will now, after the fact, sign on to this fellow. But it's going to be also in the future too, I'm afraid.
Any questions for Brian? Is there a motion to approve this?
So what do we do if the outcome is from the ground up, it's just junk? Do we tear down the building and start over? How big of a settlement do we think we could get from this?
I think that's gonna depend on what he finds as problems. When I don't always like to refer to my previous experience because it was elsewhere. But in that case, he came up with an actual budget and a list of, in the end, a cost estimate of all the things he thought had to be replaced. And that's the list we took into arbitration. So I think it's gonna, just from the talk today, it's gonna involve the paint, there are a couple of factors going on. The city, on the recommendation of the engineer, didn't replace the 2 rooftop dehumidifiers. It was their belief that those could be rehabbed. That never worked. So you have all the funding that the city put into the rehab of those. And if you'll remember, we kept coming back to you and saying, well, this is the latest thing that has to be fixed in those existing units. And still one unit never got fixed. The other one got fixed well enough, we hope, that it's just blowing. It isn't really dehumidifying, it's blowing air that we think will keep going until something more permanent can be done. So you have everything the city has spent so far and hasn't worked in those rooftop units and the paint that's peeled off. And then on top of that, you have what the council approved, I think it was like around 430,000 in the new single rooftop unit. So you've got 2 levels here, plus all of the problems caused by humidity along the way. And I can't tell you all the problems that it could end up as. I don't see it becoming a complete demo to the ground, but I can see a lot of it having to be redone. I'm just a layman, but from the way it was spoken about, unless it's studied further to know exactly what we're dealing with, it could be a significant part of that building that has to be fixed, replaced. Can't tell you at this phase, though. But unless we have somebody like this that is gonna help us and be our consultant or our expert witness, I don't think we're gonna get very far.
From a management standpoint, what do you expect the community to receive by having the arbitrator or the expert witness? Will we actually get a quality product in the end? That's the struggle I have with it.
About whether to what?
You hire an engineer because they're an expert. You hire an expert because they're supposed to be good. You take the recommendations of those consulting that consult to you. And each time, the taxpayer continues to pay the bill. That's why it's hard. We've got, what is it, 438,000 coming in on that rooftop unit. We've had a geo loop that hasn't worked from 2005. We've eaten. Amy'd have to do a vendor check through Encode to see how many recirculation pumps have blown up. We eat heaters up there like they're candy. It's just really tough that, the humidity is at a level right now from being up there. You can just feel the air being heavy, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Which means even trying to exhaust the air out right now, the amount of humidity being created by the vessel is not doing us any favors.
And this is a process to mitigate our further exposure to paying more.
Say what now, Brian?
This is to, hiring this consultant will allow us to mitigate how much we actually then have to pay if it does go as far as court or an arbitrator.
You know, but it's tough. You
Totally.
understand that?
Oh, yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where it's hard, you know, like, I hate to keep hiring experts when we keep getting sold a lemon. And that's what's tough for me.
But if we don't, where are we?
Yeah.
That's why it really sucks.
Mhm.
It'd be like me saying, oh, my truck with 260,000 is great because it's got fix or repair daily. But no, it's how you take care of it when you shoot from the, you know, and everybody gets bad engineering every now and then. You know, that I understand, but this thing has just haunted this community. And it really makes it tough. $3,000 is peanuts to the city, you know, in the grander scheme.
That's the opening amount, yes.
But the final burden to the taxpayer is what truly just frightens me to no end. And living in town, I feel that every day.
But again, I don't know what reality then would we have if we didn't go this way. I mean, we didn't accept the project from the general contractor, did we? We can't accept it.
And we've held back as much retainage as possible,
I believe so, yes.
you know, 'cause
The only part of it that we have accepted is the membrane roof. That's the only part of it that HBK, the engineer, has approved. But we even have to look into that because there's a single rooftop unit going up where 2 rooftop units have been or are.
that's gonna change the profile of the membrane.
But the thing is, I mean, it's the humidity that's up there right now. I feel myself getting the sign of it. I hate to, you know, tell you about how it must be for people who are up there all the time. But if we don't pursue this, then either an engineer or a general contractor or something of both is going to skate on this. And that I would have a hard time with if I was looking at it that way.
And that's why it's so tough to accept a start out at $3,000. And that's kind of why I go there is I'll go ahead and make a motion, but it's not with comfort to go ahead and get some damn help. And if it means to look at that facility and the entire aspect of it from top to bottom, so be it.
Yep. All right. Emery made the first, Cummins with the second.
Cummins?
Yeah.
Poschin?
Yes.
Helm?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Hembry?
Yes.
All right, number 8 down here, it's a discussion of possible action. Requesting council approval to use the draft job offer letter for a possible new EMT for the ambulance department, and that would be pending some final steps in the city's actual hiring process.
Right.
Mr. Wagner?
We have the possibility of hiring, still a possibility, right? Okay. We have the possibility of hiring what appears to be a good candidate that could help fill some of the gaps that we've been concerned about. But your next meeting isn't until January 9th. And we wanted to be able to fill this position if possible. We thought, well, okay, we'll show the council a job offer letter with some of the specifics, but some of it can't be real specific yet. I think I want to call your attention to the third one. This position is a full-time position that will require working shifts, including nights, weekends, and holidays. That was part of the goal that we're trying to fill. And so I guess what we're asking is if we can work something out, is the council acceptable to authorizing the staff to hire based on this framework?
Make a motion that if you find somebody who wants to go to work, hire them.
All right, so there's a first, two, and a second.
Posturing,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Cummins.
I had a question.
No, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So with number 3, we are saying that this person that's getting hired is going to be working the needed hours, not working alongside the same hours that we already have covered.
Yeah.
Correct?
Well, could you come up just for a second? Let's,
Yeah. Thanks, factor. I'm skinny. You never know. Get behind that pole.
assuming everything works out and this person comes in, how do you see them being deployed, if deployed is the right word?
No, that's okay. When we look at our schedule, we've got spots that we're doing really well on and spots that we're not. And, you know, if we can get them through orientation, everything works out great. I see Sunday during the day being the first spot, and then I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I want to say it was Tuesday and Wednesday nights to immediately put them on that. And I see 3 12-hour shifts, which is how we staff the other full-time employee, and that gives them 4 hours of play, so they don't hit overtime, and also 4 hours of play to accept that people stay over late. I'm really thrilled about it. People, the person that has expressed interest into it, that was the better part of the conversation on how that would be used, and they're really excited about it.
One other thing of note that doesn't come up every day is number 4. This position offers health insurance. However, it is understood that you will be declining those benefits due to having coverage elsewhere. Now that can change if their life situation changes, but currently that's the thought that we're using.
But the verbiage allows for that to change then, right?
Yeah, we have
I
to,
mean,
but yes,
so that's not, I mean,
it's,
I wouldn't go into this saying that they're not necessarily getting
it's-
insurance.
yeah, it's where they're starting off at. That's,
Right.
yeah.
What caught us was that a person brought that up to us and said, hey, I'd really like to have this opportunity. I don't need this because of this other scenario. And it was really entertaining because it is a lower risk for the community to have to pay for initially. But we also recognize that come open enrollment period every year, unless they have a life-changing event,
Right.
the option of saying, you know, we'd like to accept those comes up. And it is a risk, you know, certainly it wasn't in the budget when we created something like this. But it also at the same time, you know, if we're doing our darndest to improve things, both of us felt that it was prudent to tell you about an option and let you guys decide if the risk was okay with.
All right. Any other questions? I think we're back to you, Abby.
Yes.
Choose yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I got it.
All right. And then to number 9, discussion and action concerning a contract for the attachment filing.
John, do you want to give the council a summary of what that one is?
We've used Alan Waterman in the past for filing this attachment O agreement. It's nothing new. He's just no longer with IAMU, so he needs a new contract as an independent contractor to continue doing this, and that's kind of why I brought it forward here. Attachment O is the MISO, the WISA agreement for us to get our energy, basically.
Yeah. pretty important then.
Kind of is. He takes care of all reporting, all questions. He does it on behalf of us. So I'd like to use his expertise on taking care of that.
If there are no questions, is there a motion to approve this?
Motion.
McNeil with the first
Second.
and Helm with the second.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Poshton,
Yes.
All right, John, next one's you two. Discuss possible action concerning a pickup replacement in the electric department. Self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. I've changed the CIP that I was given in September. Not effective yet, but it requires a replacement of a truck every 2 years instead of, and that which over time would be 6 years instead of 5, which was the original, so we actually didn't.
All right. Any questions?
This one also will roll down to gas problematics.
Oh. Great.
The old truck.
Motion.
McNeil with the first
Second.
and Poshton with the second.
McNeil,
Yes.
Hembry,
Yes.
Poshton,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
All right. To number 11, discussion and possible action concerning the purchase of new battery extrication tools for the fire department. Sean Poshton? Anything? Anything extra that's not in there? Or just want to explain it for the YouTube audience?
So the excavation tools that we have are, I don't know, 30 years old. Getting wore out, tired, not quite efficient anymore as far as the new steel that are in cars. So we put in our CIP for the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 years for this purchase. Currently, we did 3 demos. The 3 quotes that we have are for 3 different companies. All the quotes are there. Our suggestion would be the Amkis tools that Feld sells. Those were the ones that we thought would be the best for the bang for the buck and
All right.
the best option.
Any questions for Sean at all? There are none. Is there a motion to pass this?
Motion.
Hembry with the first
Second.
and McNeil with the second.
Hembry,
Yes.
Poshton,
Yes.
Helm,
Yeah.
McNeil,
Yes.
All right, and that moves us down to reports, mayor's report. I have nothing tonight, council. Committee, city manager,
Tonight.
department heads. All right, then to adjourn, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Poshton with the first
Second.
and Helm with the second.
Poshton,
Yes.
Helm,
Yes.
McNeil, Hembry.
All right, we are adjourned, everyone. Thank you.